SJ, welcome to Mvskoke Radio, your weekly source for tribal and community news, interesting guests and discussions, plus a local events calendar. SJ, Stongo, Gary Fife, Jaho Jifkadas, Mvskoke Radio, Mabo Hedgedo. Welcome to our program this week as we're getting closer to the Christmas holidays. We're looking at a couple of things. Now our nation has elected a new president, and his administration, President-elect Trump's administration, is beginning to be named. Ms. Rogers, I believe, her name has come up as Interior Secretary. But where does that leave Native America? We wanted to know some perspective on this, so we spent some time on the phone with the Executive Director of the National Congress of American Indians, Jacqueline Pata. Also on our show today, we are looking at winter weather starting to creep in under the door here, and we spent some time with James Nichols of the Emergency Management Office of the Mvskoke Creek Nation. He'll be speaking about some winter tips in the second half of our show, and of course we have some community announcements and that sort of thing. So please stay with us. Let's go ahead and listen to my discussion with Ms. Pata. And let me preface all of this by saying I was fighting my computer, and my GarageBand program really was starting to win, so it got a little mangled right up front. But we got something on CD, so let's listen to that discussion. Those being full of organized crime and that sort of thing was rampant, etc. He made some discouraging remarks about East Coast tribes physically and things like that. So his track record leading up to his election didn't look real favorably in Native America. Do you hear any echoes of that either from the incoming administration or from Native America? Or are they saying, hey, wait a minute, you were saying this, this, and this?
Well, I know that was definitely one of the concerns from Indian country during the campaign era of this election process. But I've been, comforted by hearing several times from people that have had conversations either with Trump himself or the transition team, who said that there's a different role that the president-elect will be serving now. At that moment in time, when those hearings were happening, he was a competitor of Indian gaming, and was costing him money. And as a president, he will now be looking at policies that affect the economic security of all of American citizens. And the fact that this president does have intimate knowledge of gaming operations and their viable interest in providing resources necessary for governments to thrive, and tribal governments not any different than state governments who also rely upon gaming and lotteries to help balance their budgets. I think that it could prove to be an opportunity with this president.
Focusing specifically on gaming, we saw it in his past opposition to his competition from tribal gaming that he was disparaging their operations and things like that. But is it somewhat ironic that many of those gambling enterprises set up by tribes are continuing to thrive while his went bankrupt?
I can't really speak to the economic success or the business, success of one institution over the other. I think the situations are so within, that environment that, the good thing about tribal business success is that tribal economic gaming success is all attributed to helping support the governmental functions of their local government, of tribal local governments, which is very much in line with the Republican philosophy. local governments, local control, and of course our tribal governments don't have the same taxing resources that other governments do, and gaming operations is one way of helping to supplement the federal resources that will never meet the needs of our schools, our healthcare delivery systems, our transportation, our roads. You know, the list goes on the governmental services that tribes have to provide.
What do you think will be the first item on the NCAI agenda that you will put forward for his administration to consider?
Well, we actually have sent forward some recommendations already, and obviously the first thing on his agenda right now is getting the right people in place and making sure that with that that the key nominations for Native Americans and Native American positions are on the forefront. And that means, filling the position in domestic policy and interagency in the White House. It means having a Secretary of Interior, which, they just recently nominated, just announced, that has experience with tribal governments, as well as making sure that the Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs, the IHS Director, the ag person in over Native programs, all of those positions are filled with people who can continue to move the agenda forward for Indian country and address the issues that we continue to try to improve.
The list of nominees for various cabinet positions is slowly unveiling. We're seeing mostly conservative businessmen types. Their names are coming up. And one in particular was the head of the EPA, Oklahoma's Attorney General Scott Pruitt, who has a long record of opposition to federal environmental control. Even our governor, Mary Fallon's name has been bandied about. These are folks who are strongly behind the oil and gas industry, and sometimes that could be in opposition to the priorities of Native America, although many tribes do, of course, engage in production. Something like the Standing Rock Sioux situation on the Dakota Access Pipeline, all of those things kind of spring to mind and as we think about the people he's putting forward. Now, from the names you've heard, does that give you any apprehension or something that to be considered, or do you think maybe these would be advantageous to Native America?
I think it's all about how we put forward an agenda that we can create a winning opportunity with them. With every administration, there's always been pros and cons. With every party, that's one of the reasons why Indian country is so firmly needing both the Republicans and the Democrats and the independents, quite frankly, because we need them all to turn out to vote. But we also recognize that our issues align with one in one area, and again in other areas not so. So when this administration will look at EPA, will look at some of the permitting requirements, and Indian country has asked for that too. We are, our whole response to the North Dakota pipeline issue is look at the permitting process and make sure that tribal voices are included early so that we can also be part of, making those solutions around any development. Indian country has made it very clear. We are not anti-development, but we want to be able to make sure, just like any other government, that we have the same ability to engage in the dialogue on these developments that affect our land, and to be able to make sure that we can have them located in places that may have less impact either to our waterways or to our sacred places. And that's not any different than any other government. And we have great recommendations on that. So I think that there are winning opportunities, even, for example, with Kathy McMorris Rogers, who has just been named this morning as the nominee for Department of Interior. She's made some great statements in the past, around, tribal economic development, but she's made statements that are very supportive of tribes being able to make their decisions on their own lands, and not the bureaucrats in D.C. And it's very much about what tribes are wanting: self-determination, being able to make decisions on our own lands, being able to deal that, still with the support of the federal government as the trust responsibility requires and that relationship requires, but recognizing the capacity of tribes today and their ability to make good local decisions.
Now, the name of Ms. Morris Rogers, I believe, as a possible nominee for Interior Secretary. She comes from your neck of the woods up towards the Northeast and that general tribal cultural area, shall we call it. Does that hold any specific attention for you?
Well, I think she comes from the Northwest, yes, and I think that her having the Western, I think that was important for this administration to look for Department of Interior, someone having that Western experience, that Western lands, the whole BLM, and certainly, the large number of tribes that are involved in, that are in the Western area. In the state of Washington, the tribes in Washington have been very, very good about educating their congressional delegation, she being one of them, as well as working with their states. And I think that experience will be helpful as she takes on this position for all tribes. So I do think that having someone with that, her experience, is an opportunity for Indian country.
Are there any items that you are kind of apprehensive about being kind of turned around and rolled back? Let's just stick with Interior. They've been working to assist tribes in the past, and of course this heightened consultation with tribal governments. Environmental concerns, gaming prospects and regulation. Anything else, labor, housing, anything like that causes you to raise an eyebrow?
Well, we certainly have done our assessment of the things that we think, not only in Congress and in this administration, but also with Congress, that we think are areas that, could be of challenge to some of the things that we've asked for before. But we've also put forward the list of opportunities such as infrastructure and energy development and, those things that I think are opportunities. I would say that overall the most important piece for us is recognizing that there's a whole new cadre of people coming into the administration, and quite frankly new members of Congress too, who really have not strong working knowledge of tribes. And that creates the greatest challenge to us, so that inadvertently decisions aren't made that could impact us without us being consulted or being at the table. And to me, that's the most important piece that we need to tackle first. NCAI is preparing, transition recommendations that we receive from Indian country for each of the departments, so that when they get into place after their, during that confirmation process early in January, that we'll be able to start sharing those recommendations. But really, part of sharing those recommendations is sitting down and helping to fill the gap on some of that, knowledge that's necessary on how do you engage with Indian country, how do you consult with Indian country, how can we be useful in making that happen.
Let's take a look at the Congress. Decidedly Republican strength there. It will be a real uphill battle, I think, for anything that is not on a conservative agenda to be passed into law. As you said, observing Congress, how does it size up? Is it going to be hostile? Am I correct in thinking things are going to be hard for Native Americans to get through, or is there a bright spot there that down here in Oklahoma I'm not seeing?
Well, I think for us, we have found, and one of our strengths in Washington, D.C., even with a lot of our other partners, is recognizing, because Indian country has always done our work in such a bipartisan fashion. I mean, we've seen this strong Native American caucus leadership in the House, for example, with Tom Cole and Betty McCollum, and their coordination and collaboration has always been important. We have, lists of Republican senators and congressmen who have, been supportive on a variety of issues for Indian country. And so, we're not in a place where that becomes a fear for us. Because all of Indian country's bills, in fact, when the partisan politics were happening, Indian country bills tend to get done anyway because we are, because of the bipartisan nature of the issues and our bipartisan support. So all we've done is look at what does this Congress look like, the issues that are important to them, and how can we now make sure that we are prepared with the issues that we want to present from Indian country. So, for example, we've heard that there's going to be the conversations about infrastructure, not only for infrastructure for job creation, but to also spur America's economy. That's important for Indian country. We know that that's important for Indian country. So at NCAI, we're putting together all the information that we can about Indian country's infrastructure needs so that we're prepared for that debate when it happens. We know that they're going to want to talk about tax reform. NCAI has been partnering with NAFOA and other organizations on tax working group and tax strategy, and we sat down and looked at all of the recommendations from Indian country on tax strategy to see what are those things that we can put forward at this time. So that's what we're doing. And, and I'll have to admit, we're nervous about, the discussion about affordable care repeals. But what we do know is that we're not targeted in the affordable care repeal. That that the IHS, system, its permanent reauthorization that we got under the Affordable Care Act was included as an element of that. We just need to be able to make sure that we've got our protective measures on and that we are making sure that we don't unnecessarily and unintentionally be harmed. But, I feel pretty comfortable saying that we are not targeted in any repeal to take away Indian health. We just want to be able to make sure that as they bisect the Affordable Care Act in whatever way they choose to do that we don't become collateral damage.
With you not being, us, I guess I should say, not being a target for specific issues, one of the things that is always critical is the funding for anything. There's always been, a struggle to gain adequate funding for Native priorities and particularly health. Do you think we're going to have any continued problems there? They don't have to, knock out the law. They can just defund it, I guess. In other words, anything on that horizon that gives you a little pause to kind of be skeptical?
I think the whole budget debate is going to be something that is an area that we have to pay attention to. And we've had to do that anyway. Having to deal with the budget caps that have been put in Congress, having to deal with, what does that look like for self-governance and direct service tribes and programs and services. So the whole budget issue is something, that NCAI has taken very, very seriously. Every year we actually pull together a budget working group, which consists of all of the Native organizations and programs, and then we develop this budget document. We're planning on releasing ours, next version of this budget document on February 13th. And it's a comprehensive tool to educate members of Congress and the administration about the needs of Indian country. And I think, once again, that's going to be really important, that we continue to educate about the needs of Indian country. We're looking forward to the U.S. Civil Rights Commission is expected to release a updated version of, and I don't know what the title will be called, but the updated version of the Quiet Crisis Report, which really does another, external review of programmatic needs and those dollars associated to Indian country and why. So I think those things are going to be definitely, yes, absolutely on the forefront for us.
We've I jotted down a note here about the let's call them nominees that NCAI would prefer. Have you heard any names or any discussions beyond Interior Secretary? Perhaps someone to head up the BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs, Bureau of Indian Education, Indian Health Service. Have any of those things come to the forefront yet?
Well, there hasn't been any, nominations announced yet, and certainly there are names that are starting to float around, and I'm not at liberty to, NCAI doesn't endorse, nor share those names, but I will have to say that we, like everybody else, are hoping that, some of the best and the brightest from Indian country put their names forward. It's a really important time for us to have good people within the administration, and we're looking forward to supporting them in whatever way that we can. So yes, we're urging. There's been some good names coming forward, but right now all the focus in the transition has really been on putting those key pieces in place. Those members of the secretarial team, the cabinet, in place. Like that, though, I would say, and I would urge to the transition team that putting the Native American appointments in the White House are also just as important, so that we can, really begin to be part of the policy discussions right there from those, key positions that we've had in the White House in previous administrations.
You mentioned the job of educating the incoming administration and some people on Capitol Hill about Native America. We're still running into people who think our relationship is based on race rather than political governments. It shows me an education gap there that around America that's pretty significant. So is it, going one step further, going to be a hard educational process then for the Trump administration?
I think it's going to be an ongoing educational process. We tend to find that policy decision makers, not all of them, really understand that tribes are listed in the Constitution just as the states and the federal government as a sovereign government. And what does that really look like with federal Indian policy and law? And most often we find that because they don't have that basic knowledge, then inadvertently we're not, in the discussion while a policy is happening, and they talk directly with states and not thinking about how does that roll out for tribes, or is there something that we need to think about specifically for tribes? So, our education will continue to reinforce that in everything that we do, the State of Indian Nations, the policy recommendations that we put forward. We actually do a congressional one-on-one, 101 kind of Indian country for new members of Congress, and we get people across the nation, D.C. representatives to help with that. We put together briefing materials. And we'll just continue to be very, very aggressive about trying to help share that basic information, which is very foundational for how do we then continue with this government-to-government relationship, this responsibility of engaging with tribes, and not just leave it to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, but throughout all of the federal agencies and to the members of Congress.
Let me take that one step further and look at I guess we'll call it a challenge that you face. You mentioned education, Indian 101, a phrase I used to hear from LaDonna Harris, and it was a magnificently huge job to teach people, the basic relationships and things like that. So are we looking at something that same kind of challenge? I mean, are they coming in fairly ignorant about Native people, or is there something that gives you a more encouraged feeling there.
Well, I do know that, some of the folks, for example, in the transition team are very knowledgeable about Indian country. It was noted that Dave Bernhardt, for example, was the lead on the transition in Department of the Interior. Many of us worked with him very closely when he was there during the Bush administration. He worked on the Cobell settlement. He went to numerous tribal communities. And so that there are folks within that team who understand Indian issues, which gives us a really good, strong foundation. And there are people that are appointed that also have that. And so those folks that will be in the administration or those that will be influencers of the administration that have strong tribal knowledge, it's good to see, and I think that they will be very helpful in the process.
I guess the last question I'll toss at you, and we've just begun the process with a new government, pretty much. So, what are the next 4 years going to look like for Native America and the White House?
I wish I knew that. I think, like everybody else in this country, we're all trying to read the tea leaves, right? And we don't. I don't know what that really will look like yet. I do know that what we would like it to look like, we would like to be able to have the kind of engagement with this administration, such as the Tribal Nations Conference or the continuing of the Interagency Council, so that Indian issues still remain a critical priority, and that we can continue to work on some of that work. But I do think that when we talk about the policies that I know this administration is geared up to do, such as energy policy and infrastructure and education and those issues, business, jobs, all of those are really important issues for Indian country, and it will be critical for us to put forward winning policy recommendations and to continue to further our work. We've under Republican administrations and Republican Congresses, we've been able to further self-determination and self-governance, in great ways. And as we look at what we would call the era of Indian country with so much capacity of tribes right now, the era of trust modernization, this is a good time for us to be able to look at some of those ways we can strengthen our local governance responsibilities, and to streamline some of those governmental processes that tribes have been wanting to do. So, we're going to look at it through an opportunity lens.
Wonderful. Jackie, those are the questions I wanted to ask you. At this point, is there something you want to add on, something we haven't touched on, or something you would like our listeners to think about?
No, I just wanted to be able to mention that NCAI will be hosting a transition meeting on January 19th in conjunction with the inaugural festivities. And Indian Country always has our Indian Country balls and our Indian Country powwow, so there's always be that present during the inaugural festivities. But as this year goes on, we'll continue, and in the years go on, we will continue to try to put together the right kind of information and recommendations. And if anybody wants to know more about that, certainly you can go to our website, ncai.org, or become a member of NCAI, and then you'll be updated on a regular basis about what those, what it is Indian Country is doing and where you can be helpful.
Okay. Do you want to share those addresses?
So our website is www.ncai.org. You can find out more information about NCAI itself and becoming a member.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much, Jackie. We appreciate your time. I know your schedule's always pretty crazy, so we'll say Mado, and I'll get out of your way here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye.
Jacqueline Pata, the Executive Director of the National Congress of American Indians, the nation's largest Native American lobbying group and tribal organization. Tribes from across the nation are members of NCAI, reaching from Florida up into Alaska and from California to New York. All right, in our next segment, we're going to take a little bit of time and speak with Mr. James Nichols. With winter weather already here, we're feeling the nip of the cold, and weather forecasters are saying we're due for another blast of Arctic air pretty quick. So what we'd like to do is take a few minutes here and chat with Mr. Nichols about what you should do to keep yourself, your family, your home, and your automobile safe. As we are beginning to see the real weather change here in Oklahoma for 2016, our warm spell we've enjoyed is starting to get cold. And now it's time for our people to be reminded of some of the things they should be doing for the winter, both automobile, perhaps at home, taking care of themselves when they're outside. So where do we start? That's such a big subject.
Well, it is a big subject. Winter weather preparedness is a big thing in Oklahoma. 9 years ago this month, we saw one of the biggest ice storms in our area that affected Tulsa. So really since that time, we haven't had what we would call a major ice storm. But Oklahoma sees, we could see several inches of snow. We could see up to half inch of ice that causes power outages, which could affect our water lines. It could affect our homes, how we travel. So we just want to make sure that we give some winter weather preparedness tips just to the folks so they understand what they need to do, how they need to be prepared, because we're going to see it before the end of the year is over with.
Right now, let's start with personal preparation, clothing, weather-wise. We see a lot of Oklahomans who are just stuck to wearing shorts and sneakers. I mean, all the time. You see their legs turning blue, but they're still, got to wear those sneakers and shorts. So clothing-wise and being prepared, what will you suggest?
Well, of course, clothing is going to be a personal preference, but anytime that you're going to be out in the elements for any given time, you want to make sure that basically that you're layered up, depending on how long you're going to be out. So if it means some long johns underneath the jeans or the slacks and a heavy coat with gloves and just like Mom and Grandma told us for years, making sure that our feet are warm and making sure that our head's covered, because that's where we lose the majority of our heat. That's what we want people to understand, as well as having the right type of footwear. We get a little bit of precipitation and the temperatures are below freezing. We've got ice and slick conditions, and that's where people start ending up in the emergency room because they don't have the proper type of footwear. They slip and fall, and it could be something as simple as just bumps and bruises to broke bones. So we want to make sure that people are dressed appropriately.
So your Michael Jordans might be nice to get around on the sidewalk, but ice and snow, they're not so good.
Correct. I would say something that's got a good sole on it, lug boots, anything that's going to grab traction, and watching where you put your feet and not taking big steps, taking small steps so that you don't get your balance out there and you slip and fall.
When I was in Alaska, we learned to really respect the weather. I mean, that could really be life or death. And one of the things they always stressed was that be prepared, even if you're in your automobile with a wonderful heater. If you're not dressed for it and you have a breakdown or a collision or something, slide off the road, you're in deep trouble, right?
Absolutely. We want to make sure that people are aware that you need to have a full tank of gas if at all possible, and make sure that you've got maybe an extra set of warm clothes, a blanket, some way of signaling somebody, whether it be a fully charged cell phone or flashlight, whatever it might be, a kitty litter in the back of the car to help you get traction underneath your wheels. And even we've had people, of course, if it gets too cold, water's going to freeze, but have some way of keeping yourself, maybe some snack bars or something in case you are off the road for a while until somebody finds you.
Okay, now you're talking about some of the preparations at home. I guess if you got some idea you can share on winterizing your home and being prepared and what to look out for.
Sure. You know, a lot of homes in Oklahoma are just not winterized. We have leaks around our windows, so it might be something as simple as putting some plastic up over the windows, or making sure that we've got the caulking is correct around the windows, gaps underneath doors. Making sure that we throw maybe a towel in front of the door, or a blanket over the door, or something just to keep that wind from coming in. And then being prepared as far as outside faucets, maybe cover them. I know Walmart and some of the other places sell little covers to go over your faucets on the outside that are made of styrofoam to help kind of insulate those from the winter time. And just making sure that your heating your heating is where it needs to be, that it's running efficiently, that your filters are clean, and keep your home just as toasty as you need it to.
Now, you mentioned heat there. Let me look at the what not to do kind of thing for a second there. Some people think that if you throw open your oven, that'll help, or God forbid they burn a charcoal brazier or something inside, whatever else, something related like that. What can be the results?
Well, the biggest thing is going to be carbon monoxide, and we want to make sure that you use the proper type of heating. Obviously, we want like a central heat and air unit, but if that's not something that you have, I know there's a lot of homes out there that still have wall furnaces or floor furnaces. But making sure that you're safe by having a working smoke detector, having a working carbon monoxide detector, not using that stove. And I know that's something that my parents and grandparents used a lot to help heat the house, but it doesn't burn off as clean as it needs to, and it can fill the house up and with that carbon monoxide, which one day we might not wake up if we continue to do that.
What about wood fires, either in a fireplace or a stove that you've gotten designed to do that? That is a good alternative, but you still have to be careful with both of them, right?
Absolutely. Making sure that your chimneys are clean, that they don't have any soot buildup. It's wood burning fireplaces and stoves are a great alternative to heat, and a lot of people, especially within our jurisdiction, use that. Burning the right types of wood that don't put off a lot of soot that could build up and make give us that opportunity for a fire within our chimney, because those are very, very dangerous.
Now, you mentioned fire there. Of course, being the holiday season, there are Christmas trees and candles and this sort of thing. That's a real danger. We're seeing it pop up in the news every day now. I've seen something about a fire. So what kind of information would you want to share about open flames?
So, the best way is just to stay away from open flames. Everybody likes to decorate for the holidays, and candles used to be one of the best ways, candles in the windows and things, but they've got a lot of different alternatives out there with LED candles and electric candles that look just as real. And as far as Christmas trees go, listened to a report last night, as a matter of fact, and they suggest that obviously if you have a live Christmas tree, making sure that it's watered, cutting it off at the base an inch or two from the bottom so that it can absorb that water. And if you get into a situation where you start seeing needles fall off before Christmas actually comes, then it might be, rather than watering it once a day, maybe we need to do it a couple of times a day. Most of your Christmas tree fires, though, will happen after Christmas and between New Year's, because people just forget to water them. So the good thing about it is, with technology, we don't have, a lot of people don't have the big bulbs that go on Christmas trees anymore that get really hot. But if that's something that you still do have, and you're still a live tree type of person, you want to make sure that you've got plenty of water. During
the season, we're going to get ice and snow eventually, unless there's real climactic shift there. And when people get out to deal with it, they can also get themselves into trouble, first from slipping, but also from the exertion, right?
Absolutely. We see a big rise this time of year when we start getting ice and snow on the ground, where people get out and try to remove it themselves and overexert, and then have some type of heart event, cardiac event. So, it's even though it's cold outside and we might not be sweating as much as we think we are, we're still working our bodies. So just take it in chunks, do a little bit at a time. And if it's not something that you really should be doing, call a friend or a family member, or find a young one that is within the neighborhood to come and do it, and give them a few extra dollars to earn some money.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because it was running through my mind. We see kids with shovels trying to make a few bucks, right?
Absolutely. It's, I can remember the days where I pushed a lawnmower up and down the neighborhood blocks asking people to mow, and kids are out there wanting to make a few bucks so that they can buy games or to go along with the Christmas money that they're getting or whatever it might be. So, and it's a great way to teach them how to help others and serve others and make a little money on the side.
Let's shift to automobiles and the highway. I know years ago I saw the the ice storm that just completely wiped out the state, it seemed like. And sometimes people just don't take it that seriously. They think they can still do the speed limit or worse and zip down the highway in their car, their truck, whatever else. What would you recommend?
Well, just knowing what the road conditions are. You can find road conditions online through the Oklahoma Highway Patrol, or you can actually call. They've got a hotline number. Don't have it right offhand, but and then watching the weather. They're going to tell you what the road conditions are. Bridges and overpasses are the first things that are usually going to turn slick. Any type of incline hills that we might drive, but biggest thing is just slow down if you have to be out on it. I've noticed in the last couple of years that the trend is the media telling people just to stay home. I know that we have to get to work. I know that we have things to do, but it doesn't matter if you've got a four-wheel drive truck or if you've got a little bitty front-wheel drive vehicle. Ice is ice, and it's slick. And if you don't have the proper traction, you're not going to make it very far.
What about resources if people get in trouble, whether it's at home and medical, or their car slides into a ditch, or something else like that? First of all, let's start with the Mvskoke Creek Nation. Do you all respond to this sort of thing?
We do not respond to medical emergencies per se. We want people to call 911 to get the ambulance out there, or the fire department, or whatever law enforcement agency. We will assist them, but we're not the first call that people need to make. So if you slide off the road, or if you have a fender bender, or if there's some type of medical emergency at home, you want to make sure that you call 911. Or if you don't have 911 in your area, you can still make sure that you know what the emergency numbers are to those local agencies.
Now, that would include, of course, the Highway Patrol, emergency medical technicians, fire department, I presume, things like that. And is there anyone else there that we're not including?
I think that we've pretty much hit it all. 911 gets your fire, EMS, and law enforcement in all of our jurisdictions, as far as I know. Star 55 on your cell phone will get you the Highway Patrol. Biggest thing is, especially if you're out on the roadway, know where you are. Be able to give somebody some directions, because cell phones, even though they're big with technology, they don't come up with an address, and you want to know that you're in between point A and point B so that you can point the emergency services in the right direction.
It might be a good idea to let someone know if you're going to take a trip then. Either the person that you're expecting to see, or folks around home. Let them know if you're going from Tulsa to Henrietta, something like that, or in the rural sections in particular.
Absolutely. Let somebody know what your itinerary is, how long you think that it's going to take, so that if you're not there within that allotted time slot, they can either call you on the phone if you have a cell phone, or they can send somebody out to look for you. It I know a lot of husbands and wives do the same thing. If the wife leaves and she's going somewhere, he knows that she's leaving, and she calls when she gets there, so that that they're safe, and that's a good rule of thumb.
Okay, is there anything else here that we should be talking about? Even I know this isn't your field, but if someone has a problem, mental health, depression, or something like that, you are aware of some resources.
Our health systems here at Creek Nation definitely have the resources for that. So that would be just a call. This time of year is tough for some people because of loss of loved ones, or maybe kids are growing and out of the house and not able to come in for the holidays. So people do get depressed. And I did notice the other day that our health systems put out some numbers that people can call and get those resources.
I know you talk with me actually on the same subjects about safety and things like that, and a lot of people will be echoing the same sorts of things. But does your department, emergency management, see a lot more calls or hear a lot more requests during this particular season, or is there a month or something like that?
I wouldn't narrow it down to a month, but winter weather and then tornado season that heightens people's awareness. So we get calls just like this to be able to give tips and preparedness ideas for people to do. And then, of course, if we do have some type of event, whether it be a lot of snow or ice that shuts down people for a while, or an emergency with thunderstorms or tornadoes or whatever, the calls do get they do increase a little bit. But the one good thing is just educating people like this on being prepared, and it takes time, but over the years I see that it's working now.
Last question here. I know that yourself and your department have to pay a lot of attention to the weather and forecasts and discussions like that. Have you been given any idea of what Oklahomans might be expecting to see for the change from 2016 to 2017?
Well, we watch the National Weather Service. We've got some other resources that we watch, and what I've seen that's going to come up within this month of December, actually, we've got 2 or 3 cold fronts that are going to come through. Of course, they're still a little ways out, and the models that they're showing are kind of going back and forth, but there's a good possibility that Christmas Day we might see a little bit of rain that turns over to snow, that turns over to ice, which is going to be a problem for people that are traveling. So the one thing that we know is that Oklahoma weather can change at the drop of a hat, and but the media is definitely good about trying to forecast many days out. And that's what we want people to understand is be prepared. If the media starts talking about it, don't wait until the last minute to run to Walmart and grab your bread and milk, because you're probably not going to find it. Have it beforehand, making sure that you've got enough wood for your fireplaces, making sure that your propane tanks are filled up, because once those things do happen and we get snow and ice on the ground, those propane companies aren't going to be able to make it to your house if you run out of propane. And it's going to be really difficult unless you have a good chainsaw to go out and cut your own wood to burn in the fireplace. So being prepared, making sure that you've got food and water, and know what your plan is if you do go without electricity. Know that you can call your electric company and find out. They're going to give you an estimated time probably longer than what it will actually take. But have a plan maybe to be able to go to a friend or a family member so that until the electricity comes back on. Those are things that we want people to start preparing now so that it doesn't take them by surprise when it happens.
Okay, great. Mr. Nichols, thank you so much. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much.
James Nichols of the Emergency Management Program for the Mvskoke Creek Nation, giving us some winter tips about some of the things that you might want to be looking for. So make sure that you're prepared and ready to go, expect something unexpected to happen. So we want to do that. We're going to try and help out Mvskoke food sovereignty here. I understand they've got a workshop coming up, I believe, tomorrow, the 15th, and we got to let's give them a hand and help them with a little bit of publicity here. We got a couple of their staff people who have just dropped into the studio. Why don't you introduce yourselves?
Okay. My name is June Marshall. I'm the community coordinator for Mvskoke Food Sovereignty Initiative.
And I'm Rick Denny.
Okay, you've got an interesting workshop sponsored by yourselves, USDA, and the Mvskoke Creek Nation Realty Department for farmers and ranchers. So why don't one of you tell us what you've got?
Yeah, it's a grant that we are working with the USDA and also with the Creek Nation's Realty Department. And this is the workshop is targeting farmers and ranchers, especially veteran farmers. And we're also looking to help people with the land issues that a lot of Native people have become, as their land has been passed down, there become a lot of issues where they're unable to access the land. And so the Realty and the BIA will be coming down to talk about that.
Okay, now I'm a fairly new landowner, if you want to call it that, from our family's heritage that passed it down, and now it's in my hands. I'm not a farmer and rancher, though, so what kind of things will you be focusing on in your agenda?
Okay, we have some programs where the USDA has some really nice programs for individual landowners, especially the ones that own Indian land, and our land sometimes is restricted because of that status. But there's a lot of programs that individuals can apply for, in addition to, as you know, nations can apply for different programs that's offered through USDA. And they're going to be there all day. USDA is going to be there, and they're going to just tell us what is available for us.
Well, that'd be kind of
for
neat.
Native people.
Yeah, if you've got perhaps something would help them make decisions on whether or not to develop the land, or even, I guess, to sell it, or if you're going to raise cattle or something, I presume you're going to look at that kind of thing.
We're targeting our farmers and ranchers and veterans, and to help them to farm their lands. And with restricted land, like our allotment land or whatever, we do have some restrictions. And the Bureau of Indian Affairs is going to be there, and the Realty Department with Mvskoke Food, not Mvskoke Food, but Creek Nation is going to be there to help us come up with some answers that we may have.
Thought for a second there you guys are expanding the
I know, we're expanding our scope of work.
No, that's crazy enough. Now, I just got into the landowner business, if you want to call it, so to speak, and was completely overwhelmed by all the legalese and options and things like that, leases and stuff like that. So I presume these will be something where you'll have a landowner 101 kind of thing to help us understand these sort of things.
Hopefully we'll have quite a few farmers and ranchers there, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs is going to be there, the USDA is going to be there, and also the Realty Department, where we can learn from one another, because I'm like you, I'm in the dark about my own Indian land. I have some allotment land myself, and I don't know what I can do or not do with that land. So we're going to have a lot of questions for all of these people.
That would make sense for folks like us then who don't know, because quite honestly, when I sat down in a meeting with a BIA and other landowners in our allotment area, and the oil producer, they started throwing out a lot of terms that just went over my head pretty quick. But in kind of pinning them down, I understand that, well, okay, we got a new lease, it might be more money, and whether it's restricted or not makes a difference on whether it's taxable or not and things like that. So that's kind of what I would assume that you're looking for and want to do.
Yes, this is going to be the first of, I believe, 4 workshops that Mvskoke Food Sovereignty is going to be hosting throughout the year, within the year. So there'll be other workshops where the farmers and ranchers can come and they can learn from these people about their land, their Indian land that they have, and the things that we can and can't do. And tomorrow is the first day, and it's going to be start at 9 o'clock. It's going to be at the Creek College. I know that's not the correct name of it, but
College of the Mvskoke
yes,
Nation.
it's going to be. That's where it's going to be held, and we have invited other nations to come and participate and be involved with us, along with, of course, our local farmers and ranchers, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and the Realty Department, and anyone else who's interested.
Well, you mentioned other workshops. While we've got you here, can you share what those workshops will be looking at?
It's basically going to be the same thing. We're going to go to different areas within the Mvskoke Creek Nation territory. We're going to be hosting these different workshops for anyone. Mm-hmm. For anyone that like if you have land that you're leasing your land and you don't know what you can or can't do, we're going to be there to help answer some of those questions.
Okay, and you're moving them around.
Yes, in the area.
Country. Good. Now, we haven't spoken with you guys in a while, so for our listeners not familiar with your organization, maybe you can give me a real quick capsule of Mvskoke Food Sovereignty Initiative.
Yeah, we've been in operation for, I believe, about close to 9 years now, and it's a nonprofit. We're completely independent. So that we can work with just about anybody, and we're a 501c3 nonprofit, and we are based here in Okmulgee, but our territory we will work all throughout the Creek Nation territory.
Okay. Well, I know that you are just wonderful folks. Your staff members have brought over some wonderful fry bread and beans here during our program.
Well, we try not to promote fry bread. We do it every once in a while because we don't want people to eat all that
fat and
that good food.
Yeah, I know.
And gain some weight during the winter months. But
boy, yeah, it's a tough one though. It's like,
but
no.
we do promote healthy food.
Yes, you do.
That's our primary focus, is to promote healthy food, and to start finding our healthy food, where it is, and start gathering and growing it. Basically
right.
growing it. Yes.
I was going to mention that. Yeah, you've put on some demonstrations of
Right.
it. Well, it's a wonderful thing that you're doing. We gotta go now. But once again, your workshop is tomorrow. What time and where?
9 o'clock. It's 9 to 4. It's going to be at the college, the Creek Nation College. And everyone is welcome.
Okay. All right. Well, good luck with your workshop there. We hope you get a lot of folks. I know it's quick notice, but let's see what we can do for you. All right. You all have a good one, and have a good holiday. A couple of real quick community announcements. Of course, this is the season of giving, and the Creek Fit folks are having their toy drive, which will continue until December 21st. You can drop off your new unwrapped toys at the Omniplex Dome and the Finance Building, and 732-7914. Spring Celebration T-shirt design and art contest. Mvskoke Nation Youth Services is having that. Youth Celebrating Traditions, and their deadline for submissions is January the 13th of 2017. Oh, that's the first time I've read that one. MCN's reintegration program provides driver's license reinstatement help for current or former RIP clients. They're extending their program to all Mvskoke Creek citizens who've served any time in jail within the last 4 years, and services that could include up to $500 toward that reinstatement. 918-652-76. All right. And if you're an experienced journalist and editor, Mvskoke Creek Nation's Mvskoke Media is still looking for an editor. So if you're interested in the grind of the press, so give Sterling Cusper a ring. That's it for me, Gary Fife. I want to say Mado Mabo Hedgetscut, and we'll check with you next week. You've been listening to Mvskoke Radio. Join us again next week for more local, tribal, and community news and updates. Mado.